Gold participants and listeners from around the world. I'm Kristen Schwartz, licensed midwife and MC for Gold Learning. And today I'm chatting with Ifat Yasmin. Welcome, Yasmin.
Thank you so much, Christine, and thank you so much because this is such an honor to be back here speaking at Gold again.
It is so wonderful to have you back here with us. And as you know, we have a little podcast series going where we talk to our speakers and find out a little bit about them and talk, of course, also about the presentation that you're going to have here at Gold at the Gold Learning Online Tongue Tie Symposium of 2019. So it's wonderful to have you here.
I'm excited too.
So, before we get started with all of that, can you tell our listeners a little bit about where in the world are you coming from today?
Okay, I'm coming from Mumbai, the very rainy Mumbai. We are having massive torrential rains going on here, and many of the parts of Mumbai are flooded actually.
Mm.
So I'm just grateful that we have the good connection so we can speak together, Christine, today. So that's
That,
Mumbai for you.
that is good indeed. Is that the season right now? Is that the rainy
Yes,
season?
it's
Or
called the monsoon season, and we have the monsoon season spread over 3 to 4 months in Mumbai, starting from June actually.
right, right. It's pretty similar to our hurricane season. I'm coming to you from South Florida, usually very sunny, but we're in the middle of hurricane season right now, so that sounds very similar to getting a lot of rain too, just like you probably.
Right.
So, thank you for letting us know where you are in the world. And now tell us about your professional journey. Tell us about your background.
Okay, so I started my journey many, many years ago, approximately about 11 years now. Um, well, the way the journey started was through my own personal journey, Christine, with
Mm.
my pregnancy, which was difficult, and then my birth, and then breastfeeding, which became much harder than what it would be, or I wasn't even prepared for that. Just to be honest about it, I don't think I did any study about knowing how my breastfeeding journey is going to be, how I need to be prepared for it. I just went with the flow, and I was pretty shocked and surprised about the kind of pain I went through that experience. And I came across the Lelech League, which is such a fantastic organization that supports mothers if they want to breastfeed. And that was my first brushing over with people around the world who were willing to help, even if they didn't know who I am. And that drew me in, and
Mhm.
that's where my journey began. And then slowly I studied to become an IBCLC, and I realized that just having skills, clinical skills, isn't enough. I needed to dig further. Then I jumped into the world of tongue ties and also studied and finished my graduation for craniosacral biodynamic therapy. So that's been my journey in the last 1 decade, Christine. And I integrate all of these into my clinic work. And 2 years ago, when I was having a very similar session talk where they were asking me about what my vision is and what I wanted to do, I was just about setting up a clinic outside of my home, and that was the vision that I had, that I would possibly set up a clinic where I could give a full day observation facilities for mothers who had very difficult time feeding. And that's come true, I must tell you, and it's very
Wonderful.
exciting for me to share.
Congratulations.
Yes, it's been over a year now that it's successfully running. And what we do here, especially, is that we have clinical facilities where mothers who have very difficult time feeding and not able to latch, for example, or extremely painful latch, those kind of difficult ones, then we let the mothers be in the clinic for about 6 to 7 hours on observation. So, which means that we're not just seeing one or supporting one feed, which often happens in a lactation, a consultation, but then we are able to kind of review them over a period of 7 hours. So at least about 3 or 4 feedings that happen. So this seems to significantly reduce the therapy time. It reduces the visits that a mother has to make to the clinic, especially in a city like Mumbai. You can imagine what it seems like in a torrential rain. And
Yes.
also the fact that she goes back much more confident because she's been supported throughout the 7 hours.
Absolutely wonderful, Yasmin. That is that is absolutely perfect. I can imagine, the women being there for that amount of time, being observed not only for one feeding and getting assistance, but for an time of 7 hours. So as you mentioned, three feedings, possibly more, in during that time. That must be so beneficial also for you to see what's really going on, isn't that right?
Right, it gives you so many more insights because
Yeah,
when you watch just one feed, you're just going to see a slice of their life, which
right.
often doesn't happen in a medical facility. If you can imagine, there's about 10 minutes of feed assessment, maybe even
Yes.
5 minutes sometimes. And what the mother is saying actually never really reflects in that 5 or 10 minutes ever, you know. And if you're watching a whole day of their life, it's very different. Sometimes the in between feeds, the difficulty that parents go through in between feeds just to calm and regulate a baby can give
Yeah.
you huge insights into what's going on there. And that was a in fact, I think there was a lecture that I heard a couple of years ago on gold, when
Oh,
I was a young lactation consultant, and there was a talk about hospitalization for babies who were not able to latch.
right.
And that idea bounced off my head at that point. Like, the idea just bounced off that lecture that I heard on gold. So I'm really grateful for all the inspirational things that have happened on gold for the last 10 years for me.
And it shows perfectly, how you learn something and immediately implement it in your own clinic and make it your own and transform it or use it in a way that makes sense for your, obviously you're not a hospital, but you have your clinic there, your practice there, and take that and implement it so it makes sense for your community, for the families you are serving. That's fantastic. That's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
And since
And
it's autonomous, Christine,
yeah,
so since it's autonomous and I'm not bound by the policies, by the
right.
hospitals, and
Exactly.
that gives you really wings to fly. Like, honestly, it
Yeah.
gives me ability to support the parents the way it needs to be supported, with as
Right.
slow as possible, or as pace ourselves according to what the family needs. And I'm not bound by other facility, or logistics or timing or finances that come around having a facility like this in a hospital. So I feel very, very grateful that this was possible, and I just hope that it just goes leaps and bounds further.
Wonderful. And as you mentioned, also the in-between time, that is actually a really good concept. Something you mentioned there that you observe parents or mothers also how they, calm a baby or, be with a baby in between feedings is probably very telling also, what's going on in the dynamic there, right?
Hmm.
Very good. And also, you have been involved with a documentary, isn't that right? That we had here, we also had made available. Tell us a little bit about that documentary, please.
Oh, okay, that's been a huge part of my life as well in the last few years. Well, again, the journey of the film started about 8 years ago, 8 to 9 years ago, if I remember it right. So that was again because I felt that the stories of the mothers were really telling and they were really strong. And I felt that we had to have an avenue where the stories would be shared. And it
Right.
wasn't it wasn't happening. I didn't see any story coming out that really gave us an insight into what's going on in the world of breastfeeding and what are those factors that are kind of crippling the system or supporting the system, Christine. So I
Yeah.
wanted to kind of cover that up, and I realized that the journey itself was quite an overwhelming integrative process for my own self, because there were many factors that I needed to bring in the journey, and I
Right.
connected with at least about 16 to about 20 different experts around the world. And we've pretty much covered experts from Brazil to New Zealand, going all the way up to in the US, Canada, and then in Europe, and then Australia, and then right up to New Zealand. So we have experts speaking from all over. And the interesting part of that journey was that while I was having chats with these people who are in this field for more than about 2 decades, at least most of them, um, they would speak the same language, even though they haven't connected with each other. It's not like they really taught each other how to speak, right? And
Right, right.
you're asking about their journey and what they feel their discoveries have been in the last 2 decades or of their work. It was so fabulous to just recognize that everyone had the same language, which means that you all will arrive at the truth together,
Hmm.
you know. And it has to happen. That was the insight that I felt that was so enriching for me in my life. And this film has been screened for over about 100 cities in the world, and very, very close to now time in October, we're going to be screening in La Leche League conference in Panama City in Central America, and also at the Cayman Islands, which is just off the shore of Florida. Um,
Wonderful.
yes, so I will be that part of the world very soon in October. So it's interesting because there is a panel of discussion that happens which worked very well in India as a format, that
Yeah.
various subjects in the film are being discussed. That includes breastfeeding grief, maternal mental health. Then you're looking at, crippling, economic forces that play around, where formula companies, pump companies, or even now the recent laser companies coming into the arena of supporting babies, and
Yeah.
how those forces can play, or either support or not support in on the journeys of mothers all across the world. And the story was not very unique of any country here, Christine, which was the discovery over the film, that the stories were very similar across the world,
Yeah.
no matter where they came from. And so we have a common thread that connects us together with the emotion.
Absolutely. That is interesting too, that regardless where you are in the world, you have that common thread that goes through there. And the name of the documentary is Untying Breastfeeding, isn't that correct?
That's right. Untying
Yes.
breastfeeding, it's about 60 minutes, and
Hmm.
it covers various of factors that are, it really exposes the unspoken, broken system that we have in the world today. Despite the fact that there's so much awareness for breastfeeding,
Right.
there was this moment that I discovered in the last few months. In fact, right after the film was finished, that I realized that in the last 30 years of supporting breastfeeding awareness campaigns across the world by different organizations, we have only made an ideological shift, Christine.
Mm.
It's much has been just an ideological shift that it's important. That's how much we have even crossed over in the 30 years. How much will it trickle down to in even in countries where breastfeeding is a prevalence in India? It's not.
Right.
It's a culture which hasn't really opened up to modernization and industrialization as much as many other parts of the world
Right.
has happened, right? Despite that, we are struggling to establish the fact that we want to. People don't trust breastfeeding as a culture, where they
Interesting.
think that it's not good enough, or
Mm.
maybe after about a year it's not even good for babies, sort of things.
Right.
So these kind of deep set mindset is so deeply entrenched in people. That includes the medical professionals, because they are the ones who come in contact with parents, young parents first, and that
Right.
makes it even more harder. And it seems that in the 30 years across the world, it's been just an ideological shift that's happened, not really in terms of clinically supporting them, because we have real clinical issues going on in breastfeeding. And that's one reason why I so love the
Yeah.
platform of Gold, because they are ahead of their times to bring in the best topics. So even for the topic that I'm talking today, it's
Uh-huh.
really ahead of its time. No one's really talking about this. But the fact that Gold really opened up their hearts to say, yeah, we want to hear what you have to say, itself shows you where we are heading. And that support is invaluable to the lactation consultants in the world.
And here at Gold, we love having passionate professionals just like you who are really trailblazers here in their field, establishing clinics and going out in the field, educating, making documentaries just like you. And we love bringing all that knowledge into the world and get the knowledge out there. So let's talk about your presentation, Rethinking Surgical Tools, Infant Anatomy and Pain. Um, Tell us about the presentation, what you are hoping our listeners will take away from it.
Well, as far as this presentation is concerned, it's really my own observation that I've been doing for a while now, Christine. And I
Yeah.
wanted to share that because there's some stark, stand-up patterns that are coming up for me. Like it just cannot be ignored. The patterns that we are seeing in what we are supporting babies with, this seems to be something that we ought to look at, or it behooves us as lactation consultants to look up at this information and inquire about it. So we do need to kind of pay attention to that detailing of how we are supporting babies, especially infants. So it is critical that we look at it, you know. So in this, I've looked at neurobiology. I'm looking at pain as a factor of infant anatomy, and the fact that during the last 10 years, I have supported babies with lasers. I've supported babies with surgical scissors, with different kinds of different surgeons all across India, and that gives me a unique viewpoint to look at. How do I compare this? You know,
Right,
I'm
right.
looking at those. It gives me a very close-up view because I'm supporting every single babies and families, basically. So
Right.
that gives me a unique viewpoint.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what are you hoping that after watching your presentation will our delegates learn?
Well, one is I think we start to think in a direction which is out of the box thinking, that
Right?
what's been said or what's been experienced is something. Ultimately, our goal is to support families
Mm,
and babies, right? So they
yes.
can kind of restore breastfeeding. We're not running behind the fact that we are, okay, we've discovered tongue ties, can we just take care of it? Or are we really supporting babies to restore breastfeeding? So that is something that I do not see myself divert myself from, right?
Right.
So
Hmm.
I'm hoping that I'll be able to share this with my co-colleagues across the world, so they will start to think about it. They will start to observe in their own practice, what do they see, and then as lactation consultants, being the primary care providers for breastfeeding babies, which I again and again keep reiterating, that they are the people who need to be supporting families to go through the protocol of tongue ties
Hmm.
and not just refer things out. So
Right.
if this information gives them some insight, they may be able to choose their providers. They may be able to have better support around families, so they can give them enough assurance of what and how are we supporting them for restoring breastfeeding. So that's what I'm hoping that we will be able to achieve through this presentation, Christine.
Sounds very exciting. Well, thank you so much, Ifat Yasmin, for chatting with me here today about your work, your background, and of course, this presentation here today.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to being live very soon.
And we are looking forward to having you live here, and that will be on September 17th. And this is for our listeners now. When this presentation will be held in your time zone, go to goldlearning.com and find out everything there is about this wonderful online tongue tie symposium. We have 10 presentations over 2 days, live, fantastic topics. And you will find that information, as I just mentioned, at goldlearning.com. So thank you one more time, Ifat Yasmin, for our chat here today, and goodbye, everyone.